Washi dende gune sungyu yobale dene tangbo kebara chawi ne chu sen de kapla ren ta kebi ne chu di nang ne kyang tangbo phungbo la keba sen dene phungbo de la yang ena dene nga thamba yobe sugi phungbo chori phungbo dushi gi phungbo namshi gi phungbo dende nga yobe nang ne tangbo re ne tangbo sugi phungbo de la yang ane yusuk 중화 시 안에 대수 축지 스네딘데 여베나네 되는 대수 축지기 năng 안에 왕봉아 당 되는가 안에 이제 근데 여베나네다 당보데 지 되는가데 카톨라 렙데요 되는 되는가데 능네 장네 속당 자니 꼴라 슈신네 디링 지디 꼴라 슈인
The text that we're studying in this class is the Gateway to Knowledge, or the treatise entitled The Gate for Entering the Way of a Pandita. And the text is divided into 3 parts. It discusses 3 different sections: the 10 topics of expertise, of learnedness, the 4 seals, and the 4-fold correct discrimination. Out of these 3 topics, we are currently discussing the 10 topics of expertise or learnedness, and the first of the 10 topics is becoming learned in the aggregates. The aggregates are further divided into 5 aggregates: form, sensation, perception, formation, and consciousness. Out of those, we're currently discussing the first one, form. And form can be further divided into the 4 causal forms and the 11 resultant forms. The 11 resultant forms can be further divided into the 5 sense faculties, the 5 sense objects, and then the mental objects. So we're currently discussing the 5 sense objects, and of those 5, we have already covered visual form and sound, and today we will continue with smells or odors.
Di ngonla dangong ta tiwashi 중송 지와데 단다데 찍는다 자 이꼴라 지와레도 되네 단다 자기 능라 베나 심진도 뜸바 된 줘버려 제바 당 심진도 미됨바 된 줘버려 미제바 다디 꼴라지 송로 나운스 엔데 또 양저지 송로 나운스 이렇게 자 중앙 신신네 다디데 네 penna dile kyang kongi de penna sheju gi chorwe simba gone chebara sheju sim gi chorwa gi sin ma sin namna sim gi sim dang demba ji gi lab ma lab chaw ke cha ji chaw redwa sin ma sin sim ju chorwe sin ma sin sheju shebe sin ma sin di laba na shin chine duru langdur gi tönda tön mi tön langdur gi tönda tönba dang mi tön bi gone ena yang ni years de la simjindu tönba tön jobara cheba dang simjindu mi tönba tön jobara mi cheba tadine ni dan de simjindu tönba sana pena drade lebge na de drade going de kala drade gi miso simjin gi draimba sa drade going de kala drade miso simjin gi draimba pena simjin gi draimba gosongna simjindu tönba 된 제발 제바스나 랑도르기 된 제발 제바 베나 최 골라 베나 롭종 납자 롭소 딘데 골라 계절 라비오나 데 랑도르기 된다 조바 네 딘데 레스 다토 바 제바스 다토 바 제바 다토 바 제바스 데니 심진도 미된바 자데기 미소 심진 민바라 심진 민바 심진도 미된바 세라 trade ko penna langdor ke kecha tinde am exception ka ko mare chu dang lung ke tra nang shin chu da dang lung da nang shin means tadi de so langdor ke tön me tön ke ko ne e wa chena odines dos sumeredu
Dita da semchen ki da mi chigi dön mebe tachik temba yina. Di niba di chagirave
제 당보대랑 제
당보디랑ve.
당보대랑 제 간에서 니바데 심진데 미템바 심진 말에 니바데기 다데 심진 말에 니바기 다데 아니 추당 롱당 된저 심진 심 다데 고디칼라 심진기 다 말에 추이 다데 다오 아니 롱기 다 다오
아니 디 니가 고게도 semchen chigi 다디 틈게 바디 고게도 당 던다 양
고기도
고게도 당.
나서
So here, let's go back to a question that we received from yesterday. Someone was requesting that we go over these animate and inanimate sounds again. In our text, it says inanimate sounds that express meaning and inanimate sounds that don't express meaning. And just as a note from the translator, there are alternative translations of this to speak about just that which expresses a meaning to sentient beings and that which doesn't express meaning to sentient beings. But the way that Lamala explains it here, it needs both. A sound that expresses meaning and is uttered by a sentient being. So when we talk about the first of the sounds here, the animate sounds that express meaning, then this is actually a little bit repetitive of what we saw before. In the differentiation and classification that comes above, it speaks about sounds that are created by beings that have a mind, so sentient beings, or that are sounds that are created by non-sentient things. Here, the differentiation or the special feature is that the sound, that this first kind of sound, the animate sounds that express meaning, need to be both uttered by a sentient being, or they need to be produced by a sentient being, and they convey a meaning. So that would be if someone speaks about or teaches what is to be abandoned, what is to be adopted, or not. This is whether it conveys a meaning or not. So here, there needs to be a meaning expressed by a sound that originates from a sentient being. And the inanimate sounds that don't express meaning, they are then sounds like that of wind or water, which do not originate from a sentient being. So they originate from inanimate matter, and they also don't convey any particular meaning, like what is to be abandoned and adopted and so on, to the one who hears that sound. Can you hear me, or is there quite some interference today? So I have a little bit of a weird sound going on. Okay, thank you. Okay. Lasso.
네. 니바 안에 니바스나미도 대다테 드링 데라 데라 디심 미심 차냠바당 마냠바스 다 데데 d equal 라와 d는 나이 율데스 아 나시게 용자를 줘봐 d 친인스 d 생인데 맞아 나 율진 나게 되게 아니 이제 율데레스 다 친이데 된데 샤레 d 친이 쇼스나 d 친이 나시게 용자를 줘봐 따델라 디 심바당 미심바 안에 차냠 센도 근데 유스 숨어네 더 디심보 당 디미심보 디심보다 마심보 니 냠대줘서로 니 가야 마임바 도지 차냠보도 근데 유스 숨어네 따디데 어 디마지 난 nenchola 카용디 갑라 셈낭라 초르와 가능도 이도 홍와 도지 깨네 안디류가라 야보 이도 홍와 도 셰와이기 셰사기 디데 디심바스 페샤샤나 단다 메도 지마심보 된존난신 로와 메도 지마심보 된존난신 레스 되네 양 지마지 카용디가라 셈낭라 초르와 예도 매용와 근데 깨용네 마가와도 깨사게 페나 디데 아니 디미심바 페나 코아 빡바여라 코아 근데 룰 대와서도 근데게 아니 지마레스 아니 지당게 양 근데 셈나나 초르와데 레비게 옛나야 지마 지 땅뇽도 지마 심다 미심 가야 에와 마쳐봐도 남주 지마 된데도 지당게도 된조 찬냠베 지마 다 된조네 셈라 되네 초로와 제단기 고네 되네 지심 미심 샤바레 숭아레 초로와 안에 이동와도 되게나 지심바 예도 명와도 되긴게 지디기 명라 지미심바 이동와다 매용바 니가 가이마임바 바르마도라 찬냠바 지스
The third of the sense objects is then referring to the odors, and there we have the fragrant, non-fragrant, neutral ones, and also the natural and manufactured odors. If we were to ask what odors refers to, then the definition is that odors are the sense object of the nose. So the nose faculty is the subject which experiences the object, and the object are then the odors. So the specific object for the sense faculty are these smells or odors. And so if someone were to ask you what's the definition of smells or odors, it's that which is the object of the sense, the nose sense faculty. And the first way of classifying the different odors is based on the reaction, the sensation that they create. So the sensation that results from those kinds of odors, from encountering these objects. And this can be fragrant, non-fragrant, and neutral, referring to pleasant, unpleasant, or equivalent. So fragrant odors are those that are, when encountered, experienced then as pleasant. The sensation that they're nice arises. So the distinction here, or the classification, is made based on the reaction that they bring forth when encountered. Something that is nice, that is very pleasant to smell, would then be, for example, like flowers. We like the smell of flowers. Something that is non-fragrant or bad smelling would probably be a clearer translation here. Something that is unpleasant to encounter, unpleasant to smell, would be, for example, like a rotten hide, like when you have the hide of an animal, the skin, and it's rotting. That's really smelly and very unpleasant to smell around you. And something neutral would then be something that is generally around that we don't even notice much. So just like different odors that we don't have a good or a bad reaction to, where we don't have the sensation that it's pleasant or unpleasant at all. So this kind of distinction, this classification of the odors themselves is based on the reaction they bring forth or the reaction that they cause. So whether it's a pleasant sensation or an unpleasant or a neutral sensation that arises from encountering these specific smells.
디체라 현계당 자중모스 현계기 팀아직당 안에 자중기 팀아스는 니유스 근데 카토 뒤수기 왕도 삼는 땅에 계셔 레도와 내갑이 권이 채와스 내갑 뒤뒤 베나 젠딘기 동보대 계와 당 내갑 뒤뒤 안에 지심보 요대 말이야 아니 현계다 그럼 내갑 다가랑라와 젠딘기 동보대 계와 기 내갑 다가랑라 내갑 소냠둘라 안에 디 헨둘라 안에 디마 젠딩기 디마도 요대 말이야 디타우기 디마 딘수기 민라 현계기 디마스 안에 자중세나 자중세나 되네 penna peu nangshin ra peu pare chi peu de nangshin peu de sodu ane ko peu swege ane menna chi da meta mangbo chi chu jar gora chu jorda tang gora chu ruruk so gora o tidu chi nekap de la chungwi de nekap la chungwi tima de la penna charjungi tima se penna peu gi tima nangshin se pena chishimbo dinda sawa suyo shakyo ki dinda ki jima o dinzo chi dayan nekab ki tuisu kurong kapto ki tenne chung shakyo ki kola lenje ki kapto la chung shakyo ki zending ki jima dawo tang ane chi su ane chishimbo mangbo zi chu jorda che sewe ki che shakyo ki nekab la kapto didu la yang chung shakyo ki jima sine jarjung ki jima sine o dinda sine ni yungyo yore sine kap ta 심바 양간은 갑갑양 이제 규르토냐 지마카시 당보 지마 심바 요나 갑토 뒤뒤 양 갑토 찍라 양 규르토에 다오지마 다딘데 용에 용기로 와 다이나 딘조 자중당 현재 딘조 남나 다시 뒤쪽이라
Then the section continues, and those that are natural or manufactured. So there's also a way of classifying smells or odors into those that are natural or the word is the same as for co-emergent, or manufactured, created, and apply to each other. So that really speaks about the particular time or the circumstances in which these smells are encountered. For example, when the sandalwood tree is growing, just with the plant, or that plant in itself has a very pleasant smell. That's naturally the natural smell of the plant itself as it grows, as it exists. And so at the time, whenever there is the sandalwood tree, then there is also this very fragrant odor, very pleasant smell. So that's why it's co-emergent. The smell is inherent, it's natural, arises naturally with the object that with the plant or with whatever smells like that. So that would be, those are natural smells that come together with the plant naturally. Then there are also other odors, those that are manufactured. For example, when one fabricates, when one makes incense, one takes all sorts of different fragrant substances and combines them and mixes them together and forms them into sticks or those kind of things. Like one creates the incense that then has a very nice and pleasant smell. That would be a manufactured smell because it comes about due to the combination and mixing of different substances. So it's really about the context in which the odor is experienced, whether it's naturally existing without combining it in a special way or doing anything to it, or whether it is created by combining different smells, by combining different substances and so on. And of course, there's also the scenario where something that we first encounter actually smells really nicely, like has a really nice, fragrant odor to it, but then this might also change in the future. But here we're really speaking about the time when we first encounter it. Are these experienced as like other the smells, those odors that come naturally with the substance, or are they specifically created by combination and so on?
단대로 딜라 다 나도 샤샤라 디심바 미심바 차냠바 렌게 자르종스 딜라 tin데 nga샤 tatanan신 야강라양 자딜라양 tin데랑치니 심바 마심바 니가 심바다 마심바 니가라 중발라요 심진도 됴바 던져발라야 되당 심진도 메됴바라요 당 안에 지템베 타냐 딱바당 안에 박베 타냐 딱바 안 자년 민년 파르마 라라소바딘 야강기 아니 소기 갑다된 상마라된 라난소소 갑라다 에와데 오딘데스네 당고시네 ndrogobyore.
So here we saw now 5 different classifications, 5 different odors enumerated. And in the previous section, we had a similar thing. We also saw many different enumerations. We saw the sounds that originated from conscious elemental causes. We saw those that originate from unconscious things, or from both. Animate sounds that express meaning, and inanimate sounds that don't express any meaning, and the meanings expressed by ordinary beings, the meanings like words or sounds that express meaning as it is applied by ordinary people, and sounds that possess meaning as applied by noble beings, and then also the distinction into pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral sounds. So it's important that we know all these different categories, that we can group the different sounds or smells that we encounter into.
네, 데젤라 로네 아니 제 율데스 제시기 율도 주르바데 로이 칭예레스 좋아 로 좋아되게 칭예 제시기 율도 주르바스 딜라 로델라 네네 에와도치나 마르바 큐르바 렌차와 카와 차와 가와스 다모데스 주아 예스 따디데 코롱게 ngobodige ngogi kone enata ngogone ewa cheungde kabla pena ngogone pursing daw pena pursing 싱 알모딘데 멘동 알모 디라우스 덴조 데니 모 코롱 고네 알모 데네 양 큐르바스 큐르스나 멘 큐르스인데 당 데는 아주 단다지 다르부스는 단다디 직도와 가가디 여러 큐르보 살로마 디다우 덴조 고 코롱네 다 큐르보 임바 안에 렌 차와스는 다 차기 적대 다양 그런 차기 좋아지 대 그런 응어고니 그런 차디 그런 응어니 그런 내가 즉 수요샤게 되네 많이 맞아 그런 응어니 그런 근데 저 용되게 여러 봐 차와스 카와스는 각디래 틱다스는 이제 맨 틱다 이제 자와지요래 틱다스인데 디당 양갑 강아주 데라 단다데 빵만 소디가라 지데 빵만 소디가라 각디지 라기도와 못세 지 어딘조아 각디 여러와 디 카와스 차와스네 마르자다우로와 마르자당 어딘조 까와스 까와스나 단다 오마당 다라당 딘조기 따지 젤레 강라 인데 투부지 리베 중기도와 좋아지 어딘조 까와스 어딘데 뭐 고니 페나 툭 타우티네 샤여 숨아래
Then next comes taste. Tastes are the sense objects of the tongue. There are 6 kinds: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, pungent, and astringent. So first, the definition of taste is that tastes are the sense objects of the tongue. And then the first way of classifying tastes is in light of their essence, the nature. And there are 6 kinds of tastes: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, pungent, or hot, and astringent. Sweet is the taste that is, for example, sugarcane, molasses, those kinds of things have, like the sweetness. That's one taste. Then sour comes from, there's certain berries, for example, that are very sour, or like certain citric fruits, oranges or Mozambique and so on. Those have a sour taste. Then salty, that's everything salt. There are different kinds of salt. It's salty. Bitter is the taste that a lot of medical herbs have. We experience, like with medicines and so on, they often have a very bitter taste. Then pungent would be, or pungent or hot would be chilies and pickles that we eat, the chili mixtures and so on. That's hot and pungent. And then astringent is the taste or the feeling on the tongue, the feeling that the tongue experiences when it becomes sort of heavy due to, that's a special taste. For example, when we eat unripe bananas, it gives this strange feeling to the tongue. That's the astringent taste. That's
네 제라 대다 대발에 남게 에와 두마르 유로스 나르모당 규르모당 렌차와 카와 차와 까와 오덴조 제송나 마체제 땅송네세 데네 데 남게 에와 망보스네 드에 요레스 네 케자레도 베나 ngarmodang, gyurmodang, len chawa, ane chawa kawa jere tang sungwa daw. Yang dana shen ane gyurmo nyamdula yang ngarmodang, len chawa tang, kawa, chawa, kawa la sungwa tende je sungwa daw. De nang shen de chukar nang la de chukar je sungwa daw. O tende sine ane chwa madwa dinde nangi ewa dumar gyuro.
Many subsidiary types come about from mixing them. So from mixing these main tastes, sweet, sour, salty, bitter, pungent, and astringent, then we get many subcategories of tastes. We can create many different kinds of tastes based on these primary ones. So we could mix sweet with salty with and pungent, maybe something sour. That would give a new taste if we mix them up like that. Or we can take something sour and mix it with something salty and astringent and maybe something bitter also. Then those kinds of different combinations give many subsidiary types of tastes. So there are many subcategories of taste based on mixing the primary ones together.
Yang yedo hong mi hong parma sum dang so ne yedo hong ta de so la de jidang sim la ina da do ta de kanang ke ma ke go ne ro chowa de yako she sim la kanang ke so na yedo hong wa so la yang chowa de so la chi chowa yako do ma she wa do an de to skarira kap karsina pe gyurmo chasongna ngazo ngode gyur ani subuden zo gyur andi chi de gyurmo de pha cham shangye ro jogido wa diro noba ro chi songna la wike chare ane nyangkap khala shimbo twa yakodu sadi kapla semyang namgyur yako gyur ani yangyang mangbo sanye twa tindo je pemba chungsongna la wike chare pemba chungsongna yidong wares 안디로 고 산이 마루 파 빵니 조긴 라오지 근데 중송나 고 너바 제와 라오지 어딘데 펜느기 에와 체조레스 디도 펜바 지기 연송나 예동 와스 펜바 마치와치 디 너바도 지기 와라와 하상 규모 차네 안에 수부된조라 양 pe machibudo sogin do pe na medenzo 디 하상 규모 사스노 수부 고제 당긴 도 모든조 동바 고지 당기도 어딘데 지기도와 어딘서 너바도 중소나 이도 몽와스 다 딘니가 가야 마체긴 기인데 좋아딘데 로딘데 로 좋아딘데 유레스 덴존라 파르미 좋아스 근데스네 이용 명스네 숨다 체도스 펜네기 보니
Tastes also have the divisions of being pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. So as with the other objects, this one, the tastes, we can also divide based on the sensations that arise from coming into contact with these tastes, from tasting these different tastes. And when we enjoy the taste of something, if we want to keep eating that, if we like it, if we really develop a lot of gladness and joy when we encounter a certain taste, then this is something that is pleasant. It's a pleasant taste. If something is really disgusting and we don't want to eat it, then that's an unpleasant taste. We can also think of it in the sense of whether it is something that is beneficial or is a nice sensation that somehow is beneficial in the sense that it delights us, while other tastes are harmful in the sense that they create sensations of aversion. We don't want to eat them. We want to leave that food or that drink, whatever has this taste, aside. We want to put it down. We don't want to touch it again. And even it might even create physical reactions. Like if we eat something really, really sour, then not only do we not enjoy it, probably, but also our body tenses up and we shake either our whole body or at least our face starts shaking from the sour taste. So that's what we can say is like harmful tastes, because they have this adversary reaction when we eat it, or we have this adversary reaction when we encounter these tastes. So we have these pleasant tastes that make us want to enjoy those more, and so on. And then we have the unpleasant ones that we don't want to touch, that we don't want to come into contact with. If we taste them, we really develop aversion against that taste. And then there are other tastes that have neither of these powers to have such a to create such a reaction in us. So those are the neutral tastes, where we neither become very glad and happy about tasting it, nor having any aversion against them or dislike for them.
네, 데 신양변나 데 ngarmo ge gyurmo ngarmo ge lenchawa ngarmo ge kawa ngarmo ge chawa ngarmo ge kawa gyurmo ge ngarmo gyurmo ge lenchawa gyurmo ge kawa gyurmo ge chawa gyurmo ge kawa 다나신 렌차와게 ngarwa 렌차와게 gyurwa 렌차와게 렌차와 렌차와게 카와 렌차와게 차와 렌차와게 까와 라로 딘데 레레라 툭툭툭 소나 숨주 서주 차게 숨마레 디 숨주 서주보데라 양 이동와 숨서주 이동와 명와 아니 바르마딘데 숨지디 용데 갑라 갸당게 dende ro mangbo kyadan ke dende chagyo res penna tanda pecha dende na ka shall say ro ja dende yi to pass a ro kyas ne da ta tanda de kyadan ke chagyo re de na ro kyas ne da halam ta ti ro dende la zi re do sungi do wala ta dende zen ro ta me mangbo yung ge sare.
If we count each of the tastes as it combines with another one, like for example, sweet, sour, sweet, salty, sweet, bitter, sweet, pungent, sweet, astringent, sweet, and also then the same for sour. So sweet, sour, 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 salty, sour, bitter sour, pungent sour, and astringent sour, and so on. Then with these combinations of tastes, we come to 36 different tastes. And if we divide the possibility of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral tastes in each of them, so if we divide them into pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral ones, then we come up with the number of 108 different tastes. And this is reflected in some other text where it says that there are about 100 tastes. Actually here, if you count it like this, it's 108, but the texts just speak about roughly 100 or about 100 different tastes, and that's how you would come up with that number roughly.
Dine de chela henjeki ane 조화당 자중게 좋아서 다들 뒤서 양 내갑기 권에 뒤서 권에 부리싱 배나 부리싱 더우데 안에 깨와 당 냠둘라고 henje데 그런 말모 요와 내갑 다가랑라 안에 tenzo lenjegi jowa ngarmo lenjegi jowa re ro 아니 자중 쓰나 양 칼락 쇠 내려 칼락 나라 맨나 다 맨다 아 덴델로 차당 덴데 창마 롱네 양 디디 내갑델라 양 좋아지는 게로와 어디 좋아되면 자중 게 좋아진데 좋아들라 양 카톡 내갑 뒤속에 온도 삼로 당에 에와 체나 양 생기게 좋았으는지 당 자중기 좋았으는지 덴데 니 좋아 로스네 덴데 니 요레스
And then there's yet another way of distinguishing tastes, and that is into natural tastes and manufactured ones. So here it says, as well as being natural or manufactured. Natural tastes are those that or the natural taste of whatever food. I'm back. Sorry, my Wi-Fi cut out briefly. So I'm not sure how much you heard. So I'm just going to repeat myself. There are these two different kinds of categories for taste. There are natural tastes and manufactured tastes. Natural tastes are those that are natural to whatever has this taste. For example, sugar cane is naturally sweet. There's nothing artificially done to the sugar cane to make it sweet. It's just the natural taste of sugar cane. We can say it's co-immersioned with the sugar cane when it comes to sweetness. So those are the natural tastes compared to then manufactured tastes that we create by cooking. For example, when we cook a meal, we add different spices and herbs to the food, and we create a whole new taste through this combination of different things. So those are then created tastes, and this classification is really made based on the context of when the taste is encountered. So is it in the context of a natural thing by itself, or is it in the context of something cooked where different things are combined and processed in some way?
디젤라 렉자 류셰기 율도 주르바 아니 렉자의 생리레스 류셰기 율도 주르바 류기 아니 렉바르체바데 네 렉자의 생리스 딜라 주 중화시 렉자 당스 나는 중화시 렉자데 가상데 주수 중화시 갑라 깨제 셰조 다랑레 사추 멜롱 중화시데 사데 렉바데 주보다오 아니 사 추데 lum바이 렉자 네 메데 차와 롱데 장와 덴데게 렉자 덴데 요버레스 데네 데불라 네 펜춘 파추 인데스네 테제로바 펜춘 파추 투게지 덴데게 고네 삼로땅 고네 에나 잠바 쭈바 지와 양와 제바 콤바 장와 스네 듄도스 잠바 스네데네 베나 레 잠보 딘데 레 잠보 딘데게 렉자 중나 디메나 렉자 잠보 쭈바스나 데네 체르마 수발라 소바 ane odindege rekjade zupas jiwa sena ane jiwa ge jinamna jigo chau chala rwa cha tang ngobo jigo chau dinzo kya sona jiwa ge rekja yangwa sena ne pena timbal do pena shugu trap do chik do ya kyak do timbal do ra dinde yangwa ane trepas jogo towa ane kombas ka kombas ane 장was 장모 장모 기로와 룽 장모단 채용데 갑라 ane 장와단 딘데스네 다제니 숨시마 주든 잠바 제 주바니 지와 숨 양와시 제바 나 곰바 주 장와 든스 데네 다 제곰데 ane halam nato di chorwa insaro di rekcha kandesene inang tau le samnanis di khasang di chekum de yakang la suk nang la lebre rawa suk nang la lebe de gyurwa thepki tu di chini suk de sinla ta tanda di ewa shade kala penchun chebas penchun pa thupa rekpa gi kone lapti sama ngazo choko nang la tene lung ngazo choko nang la lung yore ngazo la ane me yore subula ane sachu meron di shigar yore sachu me shigar yore tene lung de shuk chombo cha ne lung de shuk chombo cha lung de ge choko nang la gyuma dang powa tenzo la rekpa cha yore kala yang do be yangbo do tong hang do cha ne ane 제바스 칼라 저거 도교열에다 칼라 고교열에다 제바스 데디디 조 가르스나 펜준 체비고네 펜준 투비고네 생각하나 룽디기 저거라 투위 갑라 투발라 됐네 다 룽디 저거라 투인디가라 되네 룽디 뉴바슈고차 아니 칼라 신된조 시라 메용디 갑데라 다 수부디 향향도 차네 제바스네 다 저거 도교열에다 칼라 수불라다 칼라 고고요래 데 제바스 당는 신기 코과 능라 메저요래 저요래 저디 저데 슉첨보 차도 아니 추라소바 된조도스 용도 땅네 아니 깜부데 슉첨보 용데 갈라 딱 깜보로 차네 수부데라 추 고고요래 데네 꼼꼼세 추 고고요래다 디추 통고요라 데 제곰세 단다 디디페나 렉자 갑라 가르르스나 페나 체비고네 다 제마 초로와 갑라 양 레벨레기레데 단다 두루 와네 렉자라 샤베데 체비고네 룽디기 포알라 체비고네 룽슈추마찬 양양 착디 갑라 디네 네엠하도 근데 갈라 코네 체도라 칼라 고고요레 칼라 랑기도 칼라 데라와 아니 꼼 대한 다랑 지바레 다 가상 수기 갑라 양 제곰데 양 대양 유르발라 테네스 다 저거 또티 갑데라 미데 독된조 또 스카르라오레 독된조 칼라 사위 갑기 독당 칼라 마산에 저거 또이 갑라 독데 카가 유르바르니도 통기로와 유르바르 차기라 아니 칼라 사위 갑기 수보게 간데 된데 슈당 년들이 칼라 마사 저거 또이 갈라 수부 슈데 카가 차로 유르바도 통기라 어디 갈라 양 미셰게 통자르죠 주르바죠 통자르 주르바 차안디깔라 아니 수그나라 샤베 단다 두루 렉자나라 샤비 갑라 양 룽데기 조골라 렉디 갑라 아니 룽슈 좀 차네 조고텔라 양양도 차도디 갑라다 칼라 지고 차우 차도 칼라 고고요레 오데데스네 레도스 제콤 네 장와스나 나랑 졸라양 치로기 룽데 pop소나 아니 장와
Next comes then the last of the sense objects, which is textures. Textures are the sense objects of the body. So the sense objects of the body faculty that we have already seen are then the textures. There are the textures of the four causal forms, and the 7 textures of resultant ones. The 4 causal forms are those that we have already seen as the causal forms, being earth, water, fire, and wind, and their respective qualities, like they are defined as these qualities that are also then the texture that is experienced by the body. So the texture of earth is the solidity, is meeting with something hard, with something solid. Water's texture is then fluidity, is wetness that one meets. Fire is hot. That's what is experienced, the hotness. And then wind can be cooling, can be cold, or just indicate that there's motion. You can feel the motion. So those are the textures of the causal forms, and then there are also the textures of the resultant forms that are combinations of the textures of the causal forms. So there we have then, which are smoothness, roughness, heaviness, lightness, and the inner physical sensations of hunger, thirst, and cold. So smoothness would be, or softness is what, for example, is the sensation, is the texture of, for example, a very soft cloth. Then roughness is when something has thorns or is very rough. Heaviness is the texture of different kinds of metals and gold, silver, those kinds of elements. Lightness is the texture of cotton wool, for example, is light and easy lifted, or single leaves of paper. They have the quality of lightness, since the texture is lightness. And then there are also hunger, thirst, and cold. And one might ask whether those are not actual sensations rather than forms, rather than textures. Why do we say that these are textures? And we had this question come up before when we said that forms are things that can be met with, or that we can come into contact with. The question came up: aren't hunger and thirst rather sensations than forms? And the answer that I gave previously was that it's due to some certain changes that then the sensation arises. So hunger and thirst are labeled as these changes that are happening. And here now, to go into more detail, it's actually something we come into contact with inwardly, like in our body, in our digestive tract, in our stomach, and so on. There are the different elements. There are all these different, they're the 4 elements, and if they are not in balance, if one becomes particularly strong, then there are some changes happening that produce the sensations. And we label those changes as being the hunger or the thirst or the cold that is being encountered. So when we are hungry, that actually refers to the state when the wind energy in our digestive tract and our tummy is very strong, because there's nothing solid to counteract it. There's nothing that is heavy to counteract this lightness, this wind energy, and so we need food to counteract that. That's hunger. That's being hungry. It's when we need food in order to counteract this too strong wind element. So what meets here and what is labeled as the texture of hunger is the wind element, the predominant wind element, and the stomach. If we don't eat anything, then without the solidity quality and our digestive tract, then we get the feeling of this lightness, and that's then when the wind becomes too strong. And that's what we label, that's when we get hungry. The sensation that comes from it is that we get hungry, but also that's the hunger that we encounter inwardly. The same principle is true for thirst. There's also heat in our body. And if there's a lot of heat in our body, or in our digestive tract, in our belly, then the water element actually reduces. So with heat in the rising and water in the decline, then we experience thirst. We dry out, we want to have more, we need more water. That's what we then experience as thirst. But that change of the elements inwardly in our body is what we encounter. That's the textures that we encounter. So here, the situation of the change of the elements, the predominance of some elements that we encounter, that we come into contact with, is labeled then as the hunger or thirst that we meet with, or the cold. And actually, this is something that we can also see, and that's why it was generally described also in form, because we said that if someone is really hungry and then eats something, actually their complexion changes, their skin complexion or their appearance changes. If someone is very thirsty and then drinks something, the complexion changes. So there is a change in complexion that when one gets really hungry and thirsty, and therefore it's also kind of visible and even more suitable to be formed in that sense. When the wind energy is very strong, as I said, then food provides the counterbalancing heaviness. And the last one of the three the inner textures that produce these physical sensations, then is cold, and that comes from also very strong wind or water elements. So it's also a question of balance of the elements.
Nyemba tang leba damba chimba sindinelenda rekja nyemba sena kuba hajang ge tapo ro pena chakha ro chaki thakpa ro suge ge pe thakpa so de mai ba chidang ge ngarang zo kera chidang ge kera jura namjune ngazo namjune de maru supula koyo kwente kabla tene kerak tamye jo ondi ki rekja jero ondi mena nyemba labres yang penna chak raw ge hajang ge tamye raw tinde china tike ja de la mare ti nyemba sena ane kera ngaranzo subula kola kondi kala ane namjuni kera si tambe de nyambas ta hloba sene ngana tene pe mese hlobo pe shana kera ki chapla pena timbal ki thakwa tawji tamsha jo tawji na ko shukchumbo tamto ki mare ko yangyang tawji ji yero 어디 더 담jo hlobaas hloba 담바스 데가라 게라 딱딱 딩딩 담샤교 더 딘데 게자 렉자 담바스 데네 렉자 침바스 데가라 사마 칼라덴조 사사비체라 당 저거 장송 스네 다제 용기도 왕온디 더기 렉자데라 저거 장와 더 저거 수부게다 이제 저거 장와 딘데데 되네 침바스 되네 나와스 수부난게 사추 메롱된도 중화도 참모님이 어디가라 갑갑 메슈크 첨부에나 수부라 차와스 차와게 렉바스 네 어딘데 용기로 와 되네 가와스 지네 류데 줄비고네 아니 가와기 로케와기 렉바스 지네 중화 속데 잘비고네 치와스 치위르바 렉바 되네 ngalsowa스는 레가 다우당 람갈라 유링 조사비체라 양 ngal수는 협보치네 대게 렉바지 렉자데요 온데데 렉자스 네 뽕체와시 매직바데 류톱단 된네 마슌바오스 다디드 류불라 톱슈웨베 케차데 네메바 아니 칼라 된조 산니 수불라 따따 주투와 수불 중화 첨부 탐제 다한테 약보 예비께 자다오지 뽕체와시 미직바데스 뽕체와 남나 미직바 라브레스 미직바데 조 가르스는 류톱다 덴베 마슌바오스 류톱다 덴바스 류라 나사메바 지당 남균이 류데 간데 고고요바데 따따 요바다오지 아니 딘데기 초르바데기 민라 딘데기 렉자데기 민데라 아니 마슌바이 렉자오스 마슌바오
There's also another list of textures in addition to this. This is indicated here by the sentence. There are also the textures of being supple, yielding, or rigid, and the inner physical sensations of feeling seated, ill, aged, dying, rested, and full. So Namara.
그래서
Kera nyemba de tapola de shigyapso marwa. Nyemba de tapo shuri chikyemba kalikabu. Dene loba de
냠바데 냠바데 가서 남주네 지당디 깨라지 깨라 담네 딱딱지 초르바지 요바
takta de nyemba de.
냠바데 짝상 저기 말에 짝짝이 탁바 담샤교는 생긴데 배 하정기 착고기 뜨리샤교드네 말에 딩딩직 담조도 그래 hlö보스나 때네 timbal기 담샤교도 돼 hlö보로와 따디데 딩딩 따따 담투와도 오지
아니 담바 데네 de bechapo.
담바데 양케라 담샤데 가라 나란솔 렉자 젤렙기로와 지당지 차고 말에 hlö보 말에 지당 케라시 담나 수불라 케라시 담나 양 렉자 젤렙기로와 디레
알았어. So the first ones here say supple, yielding, and rigid. And those are the experiences that we might have when we have a belt, we tighten a belt around our waist. Supple is the texture or the feeling that the body experiences when a belt or something that we tie around our body is not too coarse. If it's too hard, like an iron chain, then it wouldn't be supple. Supple is more than usual, just nicely tightened belt experience. Yielding would be that if when we have an ornamentary belt, like a belt made of a very, very soft fabric, like a cotton belt or something, that would not be particularly hard. It's a rather soft feeling, and we can't tighten it too much. That's yielding. And then rigid would be like the feeling when we actually tighten a belt. And there's rigid or tightness. It's like the belt being tightened well, not too much, but well. That would be the experience that is meant here. The texture that is experienced by the sense faculty of the body when we speak about rigidness. It's like a tightness. So we have these kinds of experience, these kinds of sensations that arise based on these objects of this experience. And then there are also the inner physical sensations of feeling sated, which means one has eaten just enough food, then one is saturated, one is full with food. That's an inner context that is labeled sated as an inner texture and brings about the feeling, the sensation of being sated. There's also the encounter of illness, which then, as the object that is experienced as the imbalance of the four elements of earth, water, fire, and wind. If they're unbalanced, then that's illness that is then experienced. Aged refers to, when the body changes due to aging. Dying refers to the interruption of the life force, or the coming to an end of the life force when in the process of dying. Rested means the feeling when one has eliminated all fatigue, so cleared away all fatigue after walking for a long time. If one walks on the road for a long time and is fatigued and then takes a good rest, then one feels rested afterwards. And bold here means feeling fearless, not shying away due to one's own bodily strength. That actually refers to the context of being very healthy and well nourished, and with all the four elements being in a nice balance. So when we're healthy and so on, then that's described with this boldness, because our body is strong and we have this confidence that arises from this boldness meaning the healthiness and the strength of the body that is well nourished and in balance. That's all.
대다기 천내 안에 류기 치당스 류라 베나 니마 차우 중송나 베 차와게 렉자 데네 양 롱슈 첨보도 중송나 양 장외 렉자 데네도 용괴레스 류기 치당스 nangi nes rekjas sama jogo kyangwa la soba chu kom selwa la soba o tinde ke nangi rekja nyongchol o tinde sene duma yore sempena lye kamde lü la sa chu me long yebe nang ne den zo kham nyum de na ta do dik de na ane kham nyum be gi du gi rekcha su bo hö shi bo ne na sa me ba da hö bo shi krong kham nyum de be rekcha chen de yore yang kham de manyum na gang de manyum ba de gi kön la wang de drone de ne pena chene chu 망보 매송나 되네 매 망보여나 차와도 차도에 소도 어딘데게 차외게 직자라서 봐 되네 수부 난게 양 차된 줄라 녀바여송나 양 수부 빡과된 줄 야예 아니 된데게 나사나 근데 직바 알아 된데게 직자 어딘데 두마 요바리 쉐바르자오
First of all, for your attendance, please tell me what's the most unpleasant sound for you. That's the attendance question. Now the translation. So, as indicated by these, please understand that there are numerous ways of experiencing external and internal bodily textures. So there are all sorts of different bodily textures, or you have seen that texture doesn't always fit well as a translation here. So it's the object of experience of the that we come into contact with, right? With our body faculty. And so external bodily textures or experiences in that sense are, for example, when we are out in the sun and the sun shines very much, and then we feel the heat, we feel the encounter with the heat of the sun. And so that's one experience of an external object of the body faculty. A physical experience. So that, or when we stand in the wind and we become very cold when it's icy outside, that can also be experienced by our body, and therefore it's also one of these outer textures, external textures. Inner bodily textures are then defined or expressed in light of the different combinations and mixed up of the four elements in the body. We saw that if the water element is in the decrease and heat is in the increase, then we get thirsty, or we actually develop heat in our body and hot. When there is too much wind and too little solidity, too little earth element, then their experiences of hunger and so forth. So based on the amount of the different elements in our body that has all these inner sensations, that creates all these inner sensations. So the encounter with the different combinations of the elements inwardly, internally, then is described as these internal bodily textures. So there are many different ways of experiencing that, like of experiencing many different things, many different combinations, many different textures. So yeah, based on the different outer and inner circumstances, the different things we encounter.
그래서 되네. 네. 이제 교수 중화 단다데 이제 속에 풍부될라 에나 단다 디 속에 풍부될라 에나 교수 중화 신보 시당 대속 죽지 열에 송아래 디나는 대속 죽지 왕봉나당 되는가데다 휴차버레스.
So when we look back at our main topic here, which is the form aggregate, we said that the form aggregate is divided into the 4 causal and 11 resultant forms. And from within the 11 resultant forms, we have now completed the 5 sense faculties and the 5 sense objects. So I would like to stop here for today, and please all recite the dedication and the aspiration prayers together with me.
Jambalan bawe jidara kemban dang kundu sangbo deyang dejen de da gunye jezo dalo je kewan de da tamje ram du ngon du sum shekbe jalwa tamje je ngwa kang chondo nga ba de da ge gewe zawa de gun jang Sangbo Chuchen Rabdo Ngomwara Je Zonam Deye Tamje Sipa Nyen Topne Nyenpe Chanam Pamje Jega Nanche Bala Michuba Ye Sibe Chole Jowa Jolwara Sho Kewa Deye Jeyo Gun Sonam Yeshe Chozo Shin Sonam Yeshe Le Jongwa Tamba Gunye Tobara Sho Lo Chu Su Jowara Chenje Labdo Su Chu Lamdo Jowara Chenje Labdo Su Lam Chulwa Sanwara Chenje Labdo Su Chulwa Yeshe Su Charwa Chenje Lamdo Su Naso
Lasso, Tuchinang.
Tuje Chenang
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chila
Jilejeyong, yes, some of you will see later today.
Oh, yes, totally.
China.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dorota, do you have a question? It's good to see you, even though you're a little bit dark. I cannot hear you. You have to unmute yourself.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I was late today, 15 minutes. And my question is it better? Because do you have to let me in? Do I disturb anyone if I am late?
No, I don't notice.
Okay.
So,
Okay, so
So it's not like a real camper class where it's really, really disruptive. We don't notice if you come late, and you can listen to the beginning later on if it happens.
I'm really sorry. I overslept. I was working so late at night.